Have you ever watched your wife become colder just when you thought you were finally closer? She talks less, shares less, starts protecting her feelings instead of sharing them with you. You assume she's losing interest. But sometimes something completely different is happening inside her. She may not be pulling away because she loves you less. She may be pulling away because she cares more than she knows how to handle. This is a story about a marriage that looked, from the outside, like it was finally hitting its stride, and about a husband who almost misread the quietest, most important signal his wife ever gave him. They'd been married 6 years. 2 of those years had been rough, not because of anything dramatic, but because of the slow erosion that happens when 2 people get busy, tired, and distracted from each other. Work took over. Conversations shrank to logistics. Who's picking up the kids? What's for dinner? Did you pay the electric bill? Then, almost without either of them planning it, things started shifting back. It began with small things. She started leaving little notes in his lunch bag again, something she used to do in their first year of marriage. He started coming home early instead of staying late at the office to catch up. They started cooking dinner together instead of eating in separate rooms with the TV on. One evening in early spring, they sat out on the back porch after the kids were asleep, sharing a blanket, and she told him something she hadn't said in years. "I feel like I finally have you back." He remembers that night specifically because it felt like a turning point, like the marriage had quietly repaired itself while neither of them was looking directly at it. And then, about 10 days later, she started pulling away. Not in an obvious way. She didn't get angry, she didn't pick fights. If anything, she became almost too easy to get along with, agreeable, low conflict, and distant in a way that was hard to put into words. She stopped initiating conversations at dinner. She'd answer his questions, but rarely ask her own. When he reached for her hand on the couch, she'd let him hold it, but her body would stay slightly turned away, like she was present, but not fully there. He noticed she started going to bed earlier, not because she was tired. He could tell, because she'd still be scrolling on her phone when he came in 20 minutes later, the light from the screen the only thing lighting up her face in the dark. He started asking himself the obvious question: did I do something wrong? He replayed the last 2 weeks in his head, searching for a comment he might have made, a moment he might have missed, some small offense he didn't realize he'd committed. He couldn't find one. So he did what a lot of people do in this situation. He asked her directly, "Did I do something? You feel far away lately." She looked genuinely confused by the question. "No. I'm okay. I promise." And here's the strange part. She wasn't lying. That's the piece most people get wrong about moments like this. We assume that emotional distance always means something is broken. But sometimes distance shows up right after something gets repaired, and that timing isn't a coincidence. It's a clue. Think about what it actually means to let a relationship get good again after it's been struggling. It means admitting how much you'd already started protecting yourself from losing it. For a lot of people, especially those who've been disappointed before, the hardest part of a relationship isn't the bad stretch. It's what comes right after. Because as long as things are shaky, there's a strange kind of safety in staying a little guarded. You've already braced for the worst, but the moment things start feeling good again, the stakes go up. Now there's something real to lose. That's what was quietly happening inside her, though she didn't fully understand it herself yet. A few weeks later, almost by accident, he found part of the answer. He wasn't snooping. He was looking for a phone charger in her nightstand drawer and came across an old, half-filled journal she'd kept years earlier, long before they were married. He didn't read much, just a few lines on the page it happened to be open to. It mentioned her parents. He already knew, in a general sense, that her parents' marriage had ended when she was a teenager. She'd mentioned it a handful of times over the years, always briefly, always moving the conversation along quickly afterward. What he hadn't known, until he saw those few lines, was the specific detail that had stayed with her all these years. According to what she'd written, the year before her parents separated had actually been their best year. Family trips, inside jokes, Sunday dinners that ran late because nobody wanted to leave the table. And then, almost overnight, it had all fallen apart. She'd written one line that he couldn't stop thinking about afterward. I used to think happy was safe. Now I think happy is just the part right before things fall apart. He put the journal back exactly where he found it and didn't mention it to her, not that day. But it reframed everything he'd been seeing. She wasn't pulling away because their marriage was struggling. She was pulling away because, somewhere underneath the surface, a much younger version of her still associated real happiness with an ending that was coming. This is one of the more overlooked patterns in long-term relationships. It's not always about trust in the other person. Sometimes it's about a much older, deeply buried belief that good things don't tend to last, so it's safer to brace for the drop before it happens. Psychologically, this can show up as a kind of anticipatory self-protection. A person doesn't consciously decide to create distance. Their nervous system does it for them, almost like flinching before impact, even when no impact has actually occurred yet. And this pattern rarely stays confined to romantic relationships. It tends to leak into other areas of life too. Think about someone who finally gets recognized for years of hard work, a promotion, a big project finally succeeding, and instead of feeling proud, they feel oddly uneasy, almost waiting for the other shoe to drop. Or someone who reconnects with an estranged family member after years apart, and just as the relationship starts feeling warm again, they suddenly find themselves making excuses to call less. It even shows up in something as simple as someone finally getting their finances stable after years of struggle, and instead of relaxing into that stability, they stay anxious, checking their bank account obsessively, unable to fully believe the security is real. In each case, the pattern is the same. Good things start to feel unfamiliar, even threatening, if a person's earlier experiences taught them that good things are usually temporary. This doesn't mean everyone who pulls away during a happy period had a difficult childhood, and it doesn't mean every instance of emotional distance has this exact root. Sometimes distance really does mean disconnection, and that possibility should never be dismissed. But when distance shows up specifically after closeness, rather than instead of it, it's worth considering that fear, not indifference, may be the quieter explanation. A few nights after finding the journal, he brought it up gently. Not by mentioning that he'd seen it, but by asking a broader question. Do you ever feel like when things get really good between us, some part of you gets nervous? She was quiet for a long moment, longer than usual. Then she said, Yeah. Actually, yeah. I don't know how to explain it, but the better things get, the more I start waiting for something to go wrong. He asked her where she thought that came from, and this time she told him about her parents. Not the whole story. Just enough. Enough for him to understand that her pulling away had nothing to do with him, and everything to do with a lesson she'd absorbed long before she ever met him. Happiness doesn't last, so don't get too comfortable inside it. Once she said it out loud, something shifted. Naming it seemed to loosen its grip slightly, the way a lot of old fears do once they're spoken instead of carried silently. He didn't try to fix it in one conversation. He didn't promise her that nothing bad would ever happen, because that would have been a promise he couldn't keep. And deep down, she would have known that too. Instead, he did something quieter and more useful. Over the following weeks, whenever things were going well, a good weekend, a warm conversation, a rare, quiet moment that felt whole, he'd occasionally say something small like, I know this is good. I'm not taking it for granted, and I'm not going anywhere. He wasn't trying to erase her fear. He was trying to give her new evidence, slowly, patiently, that good didn't always have to come with an expiration date. If you recognize this pattern in your own relationship, either in yourself or in someone you love, there are a few things worth remembering. First, pulling away after closeness isn't always a sign that someone wants distance. Sometimes it's a sign that closeness touched something old and unresolved. Second, if you're the one who tends to withdraw right when things start feeling good, it can help to simply notice that reaction without judging yourself for it. You don't have to immediately trust that happiness is safe. You just have to notice the moment your body starts bracing, and gently remind yourself that this relationship is not automatically a repeat of whatever taught you otherwise. And third, if you're watching someone you love create distance during a genuinely good stretch, resist the urge to panic or demand reassurance from them. Consistency speaks louder than words in these moments. Staying steady, without pressure, without withdrawing in return, often does more to rebuild safety than any single conversation can. As for the two of them, things didn't change overnight. Old patterns rarely do. But slowly, over the following months, she began letting herself stay present in the good moments instead of quietly preparing to lose them. One evening, back on that same porch where it had all started, she told him something that summed up everything better than any explanation could have. "I think I finally believe this is allowed to just be good, without something waiting to take it away." That's the truth behind so many stories like this one. Sometimes the people who pull away right when things are going well aren't losing interest at all. They're quietly trying to survive a kind of happiness they were never taught how to trust. And learning to sit with someone through that, patiently, without taking it personally, might be one of the most powerful things you can offer another person. If this story helped you understand your own relationship a little better, consider subscribing for more stories like this one. Because sometimes, the coldest moments in a marriage aren't the ending of love. They're just love, meeting an old fear it hasn't learned to trust yet.